Hello, this is a basic guide on how to get Switch emulation on the AYN Thor. So if you've not seen my video about setting up Obtainium and getting the RJNY pack to install the emulators, please go and check that out, but I'll talk through part of that as we go. You'll also need a couple of files as prerequisites. These are copyrighted files that I can't provide, but I can show you which ones I used. You'll also need some games, which I do already have. Again, I can't provide links to those. So firstly, the files we're going to need, I'll just show you. We need the firmware, which is the operating system from the Switch. We also need this prod.keys file. This is crucial. If you don't have that, you're not going to get very far. Google is your friend. So firstly, assuming that you've set up Obtainium, you'll see this list of emulators. So the ones we want are, we want Citron, so we'll install that. Give that a moment to download. They don't normally take too long, but there we go. So we'll install that. And we also want Eden. Eden is the one I tend to use the most, but if you watch my video about the DS and 3DS emulation, some emulators can work better with some games. So have both, see which one works best, and then depending on what front end you use, you might be able to have a per game configuration. So if you pick this game, it goes to that emulator. If you pick another game, it can go to another emulator. So we'll install that. We're just going to use the standard one. No need to use any of the others. Again, we'll give that a moment and we'll install that. So we'll start with Eden because it's probably the simpler one to use in my opinion. So I'll just drag them both over there just so they're easier to see. So we'll start with Eden. So again, this has a setup wizard like a lot of the emulators we've covered already do. So grant the permissions, go through. So firstly, it's going to ask for the keys. So we're going to go to the downloads folder. We're going to tell it that's that file. And then for the firmware, we're going to do the same. You don't need to unzip the firmware, just give it the zip file and it'll install it. Doesn't take too long. There we are. And then for the games, I have in my huge ROMs folder, I have a folder called Switch somewhere. What's the alphabet? There we go, Switch. I want to use that folder and give it the permissions. If you have folders within folders, like if you have games within folders, if you have patches or things like that, you can enable deep scan. I've just got the basic ROMs for these, but I'll leave it enabled anyway. And then click OK, we'll go into next. And we'll get started, give that a second, there we go. It's already loaded some of the games. So the next thing we want to do is in the settings. We're gonna, firstly, and you might have heard turnip drivers. What are they? They are graphics drivers designed to get the most power out of these chips essentially, and they can allow greater compatibility with emulators, particularly with regards to Switch emulation and PC emulation. So if you come over to where it says GPU Driver Manager, we'll tap into that. So by default, it'll use the built-in one. If you hit Fetch on here, where you see this recommended driver, the Mr. Purple T22, we're just going to get that one. So once you click that, it'll tell you the most recent one. So we're going to get, at the time of recording, we'll get the T24. By the time you see this video, there might be a new version. Just get the most recent one. Let it install. There we go. So yeah, sometimes you get this warning, that's fine. It's just telling you because we switched over a lot of the shaders that it's already had cached, it's clearing those out. So you can just disable that. Make sure it's ticked before you go back. And then we'll just work our way through the advanced settings, most of them. So I don't play in dock mode because it does have a significant impact on performance. But you can give it a try if you'd like. It's entirely up to you. And then for graphics, so I just leave the resolution at 720-1080. Again, these can have considerable impacts on performance, so give it a try. Personally, I think the defaults are fine. These are Adreno processors, so you can force the GPU to run the maximum clock. I don't do this because it can lead to graphical glitches and just general performance issues. So most of these aspect ratio is fine. Performance overlay, I don't like the performance overlay. If you want to see your power usage and frame rate, things like that, you can. Personally, I like to actually play games on these devices rather than just tinker with them, so that's my choice, but it's entirely up to you. Device overlay, I'm also going to disable that as well. Input overlay, we're going to enable the auto hide and hide overlay on controller input, so as this has a built-in controller, you won't see the on-screen overlay. Audio, that's fine. Debugging, make sure your API is set to Vulkan, which it should be by default. And then I don't think there's nothing else in here that we need specifically. There's this Eden's Veil, which I've not delved too much into. These are very high level settings, so a smarter man than I can talk you through those. I tend to just leave everything on default, and for the games that do run, they do run okay. So now we're going to map the controls. So player 1, so map it to Pro Controller, and then I believe the auto mapping for this actually works quite well because the layout is the same. Usually with a lot of the emulator auto mappings, they go off the Xbox layout, so you have A, B, X, Y, rather than the very bizarre Nintendo layout. Nintendo being Nintendo, they do things a little bit differently to everyone else. So you can see all the buttons here. If you do notice that there's any, so I'll just check. So A is button 96, B is button 97. So they seem to all be okay. And the same for the D-pad and everything else. So I haven't looked too much into the multiplayer yet, but that is something, again, that a smarter man than I or someone with friends can talk you through. So you can also, is it in here? So if you have patches or DLC, if you come into the settings, go to Manage Eden Data, you can just tap this Install Game Content, and you can pick your patches. I don't have any currently, but that, again, is entirely up to you. And also, if there's an updated version of the prod keys file, you can just install the current one using that. And there's also amiibo keys where you can simulate amiibos, which, again, I've not spent too much time with. You can find them on Google, you just install them, and then in the game, there's an option to trigger amiibos that way. So that should be it. So let's try. So I haven't been able to get Fantasy Life I to boot. So every time I try it, it just crashes. However, if I try Paper Mario, for example, you'll see that it boots. And then you'll notice that there was a touchscreen overlay. As soon as I just tapped the analog stick, it vanished. So can I skip through some cutscenes just to show you how this runs? Switch emulation does tend to be a little bit hit or miss compared to most systems. Again, it is probably the newest system that I imagine most of you are emulating. I can feel the vibration through the grip, so we know that works. But as you can see, it seems to be running pretty well. Why did I pick Paper Mario? There's a lot of text and talking. So what I've done there is I've just pressed this back button here, and like I said before, I can load an amiibo if I want, but the game isn't looking for an amiibo. There's also more options. Oh yeah, I can just disable the overlay controller, and then I will exit emulation, and we'll give, let's boot the Super Mario 3D All-Stars as well. Boot straight in, looks great. It plays well, I don't play it well, so as you can see, there was like a little loading pop-up there because with the 3D All-Stars, it's basically a front end for different ports. So we'll just have a quick blast of this just to show you, and then we'll give one more game a try, and then we'll flip over to Citron and then show you the setup for that. So you can, obviously, if you have the performance overlay enabled, you'll be able to see what the current frame rate is. Or if I press the AYN button and then go to settings, you can see it here. I'm currently in 120 FPS mode. However, that doesn't really make a difference on the Switch. Because bless it, I love the Switch. Was never the most powerful console, was it? So there we go. So you can see runs. I'm getting a consistent 60 frames. Unfortunately, I'm just not very good at these games. So let's back out. And I'll just show you. Try Tears of the Kingdom. Another game with a slow start and a lot of talking. Some of these do have things like 60 FPS patches, I believe. I know Breath of the Wild does. I'm not sure about Tears of the Kingdom. Probably should have done my research before I started recording, but hey ho. So with that, again, have a look online. There's all sorts of great resources. I recommend joining the AYN Thor subreddit. There's a lot of information in there that can be very handy. There's also Switch emulation subreddits. There's all sorts. So I can also hear the fans kicking up a little bit here. Currently they're in smart mode. But keep an eye on these temperatures. 55 degrees is fine. If it starts getting into the 80s, that's when you should be concerned. But the game runs, as you can see. So let's exit out of that. Okay, so now we're going to look at Citron. So, like I said, I'm more experienced with Eden, but the setup process is mostly the same with some key differences. So for Citron, it's going to talk you through the same settings as before, except it won't ask for the firmware. So we're going to come over to our GPU driver. So this one won't automatically fetch it for you. You have to install it. So that Mr. Purple driver that we got before, all you need to do is go over to Google Chrome, search for Mr. Purple turnip drivers, and then this GitHub here, Mr. Purple 666, and then it should take you to the releases. So scroll down at the most recent one and then just download that zip file. I've already downloaded it. And then when you click install, it's going to ask you to pick the one you want, which is what I've done here. And as you can see, it's installed. So again, we're going to go through. Most of these, the defaults are perfectly fine. So again, I've not had too much look at the Zepper Zone, which sounds way cooler than it is. But most of these, you can just leave on the defaults. Again, if you need to import, especially things like save data or game content, I am going to install the firmware because some of them do need it. So just to be sure, it doesn't ask for it on boot like Eden does, but it's good to have it anyway, just in case it gives us any issues. And it does ask you for the prod keys. If not, you can just do the exact same thing that we did for Eden. So let's give... I'm just going to try Fantasy Life 5 because I've not actually tried it on Citron. So it does boot, but there we go. So it boots and then crashes. So again, your mileage may vary. Not every game you want to play will work. Google is your friend, but just for comparison, if I pick... Let's try Arceus. And then oh, so it didn't like Arceus either. ZA. So this is why it's good to have multiple installed. That's Super Mario 3D All-Stars. So that works. So it's a game we know works. I'm also just going to disable that overlay. Oop. The controller overlay. I believe the controls are already formatted for Citron. So yeah, so it does work. Personally, I prefer Eden. but give them both a try. Not every game you want to play is going to work. If I just flip back over to Eden and try Arceus, there we go, it does work. So personally, get both. Eden is your primary. If anything doesn't work in Eden, try Citron. So yeah, that's everything. So if you've got any questions, do pop a comment below. If this helps you out, I'd appreciate a like, and I will see you next time.